Okay, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Center for Student Involvement and Careers and Alumni UBC, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you in attendance today. We really appreciate you being here to participate in this exciting talk with one of our alumni, Alex Dye. So before we get started, I would just like to acknowledge that UBC is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. My name is Nikita, and I am a fourth-year majoring in psychology and management, and I will be moderating today's office hour. I'm also a member of the Student Alumni Council with Alumni UBC, which is a student leadership program aimed at fostering campus pride and connecting students with alumni. Feel free to follow us on social media. Our Instagram handle is @UBCSAC. At Alumni UBC, and CSINC, we understand the value of mentorship and building community, particularly during times of high stress. So we hope to see and use these virtual alumni office hours as a tool to help first-year students address their fears, make connections, expand their community, and be mentored in a safe and small group setting by UBC alumni. So as some of you may already know, the CSINC supports students throughout your academic journey by connecting you to experiences, resources, and people that will help you achieve your personal and career goals. They do this through a variety of programming, including orientations, mentoring, volunteer and leadership opportunities, and various work-based learning opportunities as well. To learn more about the center and the services they offer, you can visit students.ubc.ca. So in today's Alumni Office Hours will be in a partnership with the UBC Above 10,000 Coffees, and they are sponsored by RBC as a part of their future launch campaign. With 10,000 coffees, students can connect with a network of over 3,000 other students and alumni in order to develop their skills and build their network. I am also on 10,000 Coffees, so feel free to reach out to me and say hi, and I'd be happy to connect with you. So now I'll just quickly go over some of the logistics of the event, and then we can get started. So this event will be recorded through GoToWebinar, and the video will be available shortly after the event. And all participants will be muted for the duration of the event, and we'll have a question and answer opportunity in the second half, and you're welcome to type in your questions at any given point during the presentations in the questions tab, and I will present them to Alex during our Q&A portion. Your questions will be anonymous if they are typed in, but if you would like to use your mic to ask your questions, you feel free to press the raise hand button, and then I can unmute you and you can just go ahead and ask your question. And then please try and keep your questions as short and concise as possible, as that would provide us more time and opportunity to answer more of your questions. So now I am happy to introduce today's speaker, Alex Dye. Alex Dye graduated from UBC in 2018 with a Bachelor in Commerce and is now a Market Access Supervisor at LITAO, a consultancy group. In this talk, Alex will be sharing her story about her experiences as a first-year student at UBC and some of the lessons that became very useful to her and her career and her life after she left university. So I will now give the floor to Alex.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nikita, for that really great summary and also for just explaining what the CSINC does at UBC. I have a super brief presentation. We can go to the next slide, just giving a little snapshot of who I am. So as was already said, 2018 BCom grad, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Next slide. Next slide, during my time at UBC in my first year, next slide, please. I wasn't too involved. I found one activity I was super passionate about, which was UBC Acapella. A lot of my first year was spent doing what I call learning to UBC. That's a picture of me, little first year, after my first group presentation, which I'll be touching on later, but it was a terrifying experience. And finally, a lot of my first year was spent asking questions. What are my passions? What are my values? What are some things to get involved in at UBC? How do I do this? How is the best way to learn this? What are the resources available to me? Next slide, please. Later on in my second, third, fourth, and fifth year, I became involved on campus. I was involved in many facets of campus life, but three of the ones that had the greatest impact in me. First and foremost, the UBC Student Leadership Conference. It's the largest student-run leadership conference in Canada and just provided me with an incredible opportunity to create an event that had the potential to benefit and expand so many folks' leadership horizons. Next up was Sauder Spark and UBC Orientations. I'm a very proud member of the UBC community, and I believe it has a lot to offer. And I've really felt that being involved with Sauder Spark and UBC Orientations, I was able to share that pride and feeling of welcome that I felt from UBC with incoming students. And finally, Equity Ambassadors. Equity Ambassadors is under the peer programs umbrella at UBC, and through Equity Ambassadors, I had the opportunity to organize and facilitate events surrounding issues of equity on campus and in the Vancouver community. So everything from like women's empowerment, International Women's Day, trans rights events, and everything in between, which is a great opportunity to support equity and building equity on campus. Next slide, please. My UBC experience, I graduated with marketing and international business. I completed 2 exchanges, one in France and one in China. They're both incredible opportunities. And finally, a little bit of cheese at the end. I made incredible friendships with people that I'm still very close to today and who impacted my life profoundly. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So after grad, I moved to Peru to work on a social enterprise project. The social enterprise project worked to support women starting businesses in Lima. After my contract finished, next slide, please. I was supposed to start work in Shanghai, but I've been working remote for LITAO. We're a consultancy firm, we're a boutique holistic consulting firm, and we help foreign companies orientalize and Chinese companies globalize, which essentially means we help companies enter or expand into the Chinese market while helping Chinese companies enter or expand outside of China. So it's a lot of tough work and fun problem solving, but I really enjoy my role and working on a global scale. Next slide, please. So that's a little snapshot of me. We'll be delving in more through the questions, but feel free to reach out to me via email or connect on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to chat with folks and answer any questions that folks may have. And back to you, Nikita, for the questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And now we will move on to the audience Q&A. So I can just start us off by just a very broad question. What was your most meaningful experience that you would say that you had in your first year at UBC?
Yeah, it's definitely a big question to think about. I think for me, my most meaningful experience was after my first presentation in Sauder at UBC. We have a course called Com 101, which just provides an introduction to all the business topics. And at the start of that course, I just felt very like unworthy of being in the course and unworthy of being at Sauder and at UBC. And I was like, oh my gosh, how can I do this? How can I present? How can I learn these topics? And so like I was in a group for the course for this project, and we had to research and present on a business plan. And I remember leading up to the presentation, like I was like worried, okay, what if people ask me questions and I can't answer them? What if like I say something ridiculous and people think, oh, she's too dumb to be here? And like all these like really horrible self-doubts. And it was really after that first presentation, after we did the presentation, after I spoke and asked questions and answered questions, that I really was like, okay, I belong at UBC. Like I belong at Sauder, and I have the potential to make connections and do well here. So that for me was the most memorable experience because it was such a turning point in my UBC and in my UBC solder journey.
Okay, yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I remember in my first class as well, that was the thing I was worried most about in first year. Presenting in solder was pretty nerve-wracking, but I think now slowly you get used to it.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think that's a thing that a lot of students resonate with. So this might be kind of adding on to that question. What was the thing that you were most worried about as a as a first year student? Is there anything that you wish that you did differently, or that could have added on to your career that you were too nervous to do back in the day, but then now you look back and you wish that you did here?
Yeah, I think definitely as a first year student, like I was so focused on like purely just the academic side and like getting comfortable with solder, and like I was involved with UBC Acapella and really involved later on in my UBC career, but I really wish that I'd taken the time to explore more during first year, like more clubs and societies, because I was definitely a bit nervous of being rejected by different clubs and societies on campus, or that's why I wish I had like branched out and explored more during first year instead of waiting till second or third year.
Definitely, yeah. We have a question coming in, and it is, what kept you motivated throughout your university experience, and is this motivator different from what kept you driven after graduation?
Yeah, definitely. That's motivation is so important. For me, there's a couple main motivation drivers. One of the internal ones is I'm a huge believer in goal setting. So like even in like first and second year, like I created goals. I'm like, okay, here's what I want out of this year. Here's what I want in like 5 years, 10 years. It could be as simple as like a mark in a course, or like achieving like a certain learning outcome or something like that. So having those internal goals to drive me and motivate me. And next up was more external, like from my friends, like just being open to them when I was struggling or worried, and then being like, you can do it, like I too am struggling, and then just really pushing me along was a helpful motivator during my time at UBC and beyond as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think having a good support system is always very important, um, to just help do whatever goal you want to achieve. Um, and then we have another question. So how did you choose your major, and like how did you know that that's what you wanted to major in? Did you ever change your mind along the way in university?
Yeah, so another great question. So in high school, I was planning on majoring in engineering, but had a little worries about that a couple months before starting, so took a gap year instead. And then during my gap year, I actually applied to and was accepted to the UBC Faculty of Science. But then during my gap year, I had the opportunity to intern in a more business-like environment and just fell in love with the idea of business and interacting and just really creating something. So ultimately decided to go to solder for business school. And within solder, I chose my specific major in my third year, going so end of second year, and I chose marketing and international business. I chose marketing because I love being creative and I love the idea of the flexibility and creativity that marketing can provide. And I decided on international business because I am a huge believer in working internationally and truly being a global citizen.
Okay, nice. And then I guess going off of that, so once you choose whatever you're interested in, I know in solder there are a lot of courses that are pretty reading intensive because there are a lot of case studies that we have to do. So someone asked, what are your tips for heading into the first, like a university student's first final season, especially tips for reading intensive courses?
Yeah, it's super important. I think everyone studies differently, everyone learns differently. So like what works for me might not necessarily work for you. But I think one of the things that really helped me was just like giving it my all and realize like, and that's like one of my midterms in first year I got a 12%, which like I look back on and kind of chuckle now, but at the time it was like the end of the world. So like just like if your first final season doesn't go as well as you intend, like don't beat yourself up. Like everyone struggles. And for study tips, I as I went through my university career, because I'm not going to pretend I was this like ace hardworking student in first year, because it takes a while to learn your learning style. I was just studying small bits throughout the term. Like by second and third year, I did a week review every Saturday morning, where I reviewed what I'd learned during the weeks, made notes of the key points, and then that really served as my study guide during finals time. So I didn't have to go through everything. And also the other part that really helped me was when I realized that office hours existed for a reason. In first year, I was really terrified of office hours and like talking to professors outside of class. But then later on, I realized that professors are so happy to help you answer questions, to give advice, and just to chat. And once I started going to them, my marks drastically improved.
Yeah, definitely. I think this kind of touches upon the next question as well, which is to do with uncertainty. Just being okay with not getting such a good grade. I've also had many experiences where I didn't expect to get to fail a midterm or not do so well in the class, but I think just being okay with all of that is a very important thing for like university in general. So the next question is, this year, obviously, for all of us is filled with a lot of uncertainty. So did you have any experiences with uncertainty, and how did you go about them? How did you deal with them?
Yeah, it's a very, very relevant question. So after my contract finished in Peru, I was offered a job in Shanghai working with a consultancy firm that I'm currently with. But I was supposed to start work in person in Shanghai in May, but obviously with COVID, the world changed, everything changed. So I had no plans to work remote, no plans to be based in Canada, especially in Calgary. But fortunately, like I was able to start work remote from Calgary, which was a bit challenging, just like the time difference, like onboarding when you don't have a team with you, or when you can't just go over to someone's desk and chat to them. I'd never worked remote before this moment, and also just like the uncertainty of not knowing when I'll be able to go to China. Like the borders are still closed for a lot of countries, including Canada. So it's like sort of in this like weird like limbo zone where I'm like, okay, like I am happy to have a job. I'm grateful to be working in a field that I love, but then also like all the uncertainties of, okay, I don't know when I'll be in a city where I can lay down some roots and be like interacting with my colleagues or going for like a team dinner. So like all those things are a bit tough to reconcile with. But whenever I have approached uncertainty in my life, I've really tried to find opportunities and positives in it. So while I wasn't planning on being based in Calgary, it's allowed me to spend more time with my family than I've spent in the last 8 years, which is really a blessing. As well, I've had the opportunity, I spent the whole summer hiking and camping, which in previous years I hadn't had the time to. So it's all like looking and framing things in a positive light and being okay with the uncertainty and just accepting, okay, I don't know when I'll be going to China or what's going to happen next, but I'm okay with that and just like really happy with how things are going in the present.
Yeah, definitely. Going off of that as well, how would you how would you separate your self-worth from the uncertainty that happens, and maybe the negatives, I guess, in an aspect that come from it, specifically for university and first year students, that's from like how do you separate your self-worth from your grades and your assignments that you have in your courses?
Yeah, it's definitely important and a real learning curve as well. I think like even in second year, like I remember just sobbing and asking my parents if I could take a semester off because I felt that my grades were so bad. I mean, I didn't get to go on exchange in the third year because I didn't make the grades in second year, and I was completely devastated because of that. But then like through talking to my friends and realizing a lot of people were in similar boats, and also just finding opportunities to despite that, and just really finding your own worth in what you can offer other than like getting an A or a B or whatever. It does feel great, but people are so much more than that, and finding those pockets of community to support you and like elevate you up even when you're feeling really crappy about yourself is super, super important.
Yeah, definitely. I think that comes back to having like the support, like the social support that you need. And also like coming in first year, I think a lot of us did pretty well in high school, but then coming into university, because it's such a big change that it's very hard to keep both balance, like your social life and your academics. So yeah, I think that's definitely a feeling that a lot of first years feel. Um, so moving on to your experiences on exchange, someone asked, I'd love to hear more about your experiences on exchange in France and China. How did those experiences alter your perspective on what you wanted to do after university?
Yeah, so I went on exchange and it was one of the most incredible years of my life. I decided to do a full year exchange, first part in France. I did an exchange in France in high school and just was remiss at how horrible my French had gotten. So really wanted the opportunity to improve that again by being immersed. And for China, I did my gap year in China. I actually moved to Shanghai when I was 18 for a gap year. So just really wanted to improve my Mandarin and also re-cement some connections there. Through exchange, it like really altered my life. It made me more comfortable with uncertainty and taking risks, as well as realizing that not everything goes as planned. During my first semester exchange in France, midway through, I found out that my credits were not going to transfer. So my beautiful plan of graduating in 4 years was in shambles. So I ended up having to take a 5th year, but I was like, okay, I'm in France. I can go to Spain next weekend. It's like, it's okay. Like I've had this incredible opportunity to travel, to learn, to meet amazing people from all over the world. So finding that, and with my exchange in Shanghai, it was during my exchange year that I actually, at an event with friends, met my current boss, who then offered me a job this past year. So if I hadn't done that exchange, I wouldn't have the job I have now. So it just provided me an opportunity to expand my network.
Wow, okay. Yeah, that really talks about how to like make the most out of uncertainty and take the positives out of it. Um, so talking about international experiences, you mentioned that you met your boss at an event in China. So someone asked, what do you do in consulting? What is the scope of your job, and what kind of work do you specifically do within it? For example, what kind of clients do you meet, or do you have any specific recommendations for people who want to explore their career at an early stage in consulting?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I love about LITAO consultancy is it's not a traditional consultancy, in the fact that a lot of consultancies, they offer advice, but they don't help with implementation, whereas we offer advice and implementation. Within my role, I wear very many hats. I do translation work. I manage all of our online accounts like WeChat, LinkedIn, Instagram. I manage our interns this summer. I do sales for clients, like finding clients, going through the sales pipeline with them, and as well working on specific client requests. So that could be everything from marketing to setting up a store to dealing with customs, which in China is a fun little maze that keeps on changing and changing and changing. So it's a lot of hard work, but I love the fact that I get to wear different hats. Like we are a smaller firm, which for me was super cool because then I get to work on something new every single day rather than being married to a certain product or industry. For industries, we deal with everything. Like I've become an expert on seaweed producer in the Baltic. I've become an expert on quinoa from Bolivia just through talking to clients. So let's say that you have a soap and you want to enter your soap into the Chinese market. You want your soap to be sold on Chinese shelves. You'll come to us. We'll do everything from looking in where to sell it, the price point, who to target. We'll deal with the customs, like what do you have to test on animals? Can you get away without having to test on animals? What sort of licensing, what sort of certifications do you need to have this soap on shelves in China? So we take care of everything, and then at the end of the day, depending on the timeline, we'll get your soap on shelves and stores all across China, which is really cool to see products or services even that I've worked on be in China and like in the streets of Shanghai or being shared on WeChat, which is like Chinese Facebook, and be like, oh hey, I played a part in that. That's so cool.
It sounds really cool. It sounds like a lot of things to handle at like for one specific job. So that kind of that relates to our next question. So what are your? Sounds like you have a lot of different projects that you're working on. So what are your favorite and most effective time management strategies?
Yes, time management. Very, very important and something that I definitely learned during my time at UBC. Um, for me, I love using a third-party site like Monday.com or Google Tasks or something where I can physically see everything. I'm a big fan of checking things off boxes or seeing how complete a task is. So usually every week I input all my tasks for the week or update them as needed on Monday.com, and also just figuring out how to prioritize things. Like there are competing priorities, there are completing deadlines, and just sort of being like, okay, if I drop this ball, it's plastic, so it won't break, but this one is glass and it'll shatter. So just figuring out like what is the most important thing that needs to be finished or worked on. Like for example, the other week, like I had two completing priorities. I had to translate a document from Mandarin to Spanish, and then I also had to get a customs clearance for this one product. Like obviously, like if I don't get the customs clearance, it's going to derail the rest of the product and the project. So I focused on that and finished the translation a couple days late.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm a really big fan of having everything organized in my calendar and checking things off. I think that's the best feeling.
Yeah,
Just like
definitely.
closing all the tabs after you're done with a really big assignment.
Oh, it's
I
amazing.
think that's my favorite thing. Yeah, my favorite thing about finishing finals. It's the best. Um, okay, so I am not sure if so you are a solder alumni, but there are a few students in the chat who are pursuing a degree in arts. So is it likely to, in your opinion, your experience, is it likely to land a marketing job with an arts degree?
Definitely. Like, I think like just because you went to one faculty or studied one topic at UBC does not limit what you can pursue career-wise. Like I have incredible, intelligent friends from arts who are working at like L'Oréal or different brand management jobs. It's all about like creating a network and going after and learning skills even on your own time that will get you the job or career that you want.
Definitely. Um, I'm just Oh, this one, okay, this question's going back to courses and summer courses. So have you ever taken any summer courses at UBC, and what is your opinion, either at UBC or on exchange? What is your opinion or advice on them? Like, how is the pacing of the courses, or the workload different to like normal term one, term two courses?
Yeah, personally, I have not taken summer courses. During the summers, I had to work to provide for my year ahead at UBC. But I definitely had some friends who took summer courses or took summer courses because they did not pass a course in the year, took summer courses to lighten their course load in the year. And especially for some folks, I know it was very helpful so that during the year they could just take 3 courses a semester or 4 courses and then have that time during summer to focus on them. But again, I think it is a very individual decision and I'd look into it. But like if you're taking summer courses because you're in a rush to graduate, I'd say maybe explore some other options and see what can be done instead. Because I know it is like a very intense time and it might work for some folks, but for other folks, it might not be the best option.
Yeah, I personally took my first summer course this summer when we were all quarantined. I was in Vancouver, and I didn't really have anything to do because internships were kind of a mess because of COVID. So I thought there were summer courses were much harder than regular term one, term two courses. Um, so moving on to networking and you being a solder alum, um, there are probably a lot of networking classes or tips and tricks that you were given um, in your career at UBC, and especially with everything being online. What are your best networking tips, either offline? So hopefully in a few months when everything is offline, or just online. Like any tips for reaching out to people and how to continue and have a conversation with them without making it awkward, which is what a lot of students feel.
Yeah, I think like when you're networking, either if you're a first year student or a fourth year, even me as a professional now, like it can sometimes feel very awkward and uncomfortable. But I think first and foremost, the most important thing is be authentic, be yourself. Like if you aren't being authentic, people can see that and they won't understand like why you're talking to them. But just like be yourself and talk to folks and ask authentic questions. Like don't ask a question of what you think they want to hear, ask a question that you want to hear the answer to. Next up is add value. Like networking, I think a lot of times folks get confused because they think it's a one-way street. Okay, here's the person I want to be my mentor. Here's who I want to network with. What can they offer to me? But it also goes both ways. It's okay, what value can you bring to that person, whether it's through an opinion or an article or just like talking about how you admire them or what they have accomplished. And finally, it is third part, whether online or offline, is being present. Like if you meet someone at a networking event 4 years ago and then ghost them for 4 years and hit them up for job advice or life advice 4 years later, like what incentive do they have to talk to you? Like why would they talk to someone who ignored them for 4 years? So for me with my network and my connections, I try to periodically offer value. Like with COVID, that was checking in on folks in my network. Like how are you dealing with online work? Here's how we're doing online work. Maybe this could be helpful. Or sending articles. Like with my network in China throughout the years, I'd always send articles or ask about how policy changes affected their business or things like that, just to continuously offer value. And I think just like asking questions is super helpful as well. Like, can you tell me about what you do? Like, what would you recommend to a student? As students, you're so lucky because people are so willing to chat to you and answer questions and give advice because they know what it's like to be a student. And like talking to Nikki today, like what would I have done differently in my first year? Like what would I have done differently at UBC? And like I'm so happy to chat to folks about that. It's just like asking questions, being authentic, adding value, and being consistent are all important components of networking, both online and offline.
Definitely. Yeah, so like going off of that as well, so being a part of the UBC alumni community, I think networking is a really big aspect that, especially being in Sauder, there's a really big Sauder alumni community as well. So from your perspective, what is the greatest benefit other than networking that you gained from joining the worldwide UBC alumni community?
Yeah, we're so lucky at UBC that we have such an incredible alumni network, and also folks at UBC alumni engagement coordinators who work to really strengthen and build this alumni network. For me personally, when I've moved to a new city, whether for work or travel, I'll reach out to the Sauder alumni network and the UBC one to see if there's anyone in town who'd like to have coffee. When I first moved to Shanghai for exchange, I'd already been to Shanghai, but I still wanted to look at the alumni networks. I met up with one of the alumni and he took me to his favorite dumpling place, and just to have that sense of community that we're brought together through our shared experience at UBC and be able to have that wherever you go is a really powerful thing, I think.
Definitely. And just out of curiosity, how did you connect with the alumna that was in China?
I just reached out to our Sauder alumni coordinator, and within like Sauder alumni, I'm not sure for alumni UBC, but there's like a point person for specific cities around the world. So you can like reach out to them, and then they have other alumni in their network, or you can reach out to them directly and meet them directly as well if they're willing to.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. I'll definitely be doing that as well. I
Yeah,
didn't
I
know
definitely
that
recommend
you
it.
could do that. Okay, sounds good. And going off of networking, again, how would you suggest that we facilitate the same level of connection when networking online versus offline? Because obviously it's relatively easier in person to gauge what the person is feeling, but online, being on a screen is very hard to tell what the other person is kind of feeling about the conversation. So do you have any suggestions on how to facilitate a good connection?
Yeah, I think online offers a lot of opportunities as well. Like it can be tougher to gauge what people are feeling or anything, and you might not get replies when you reach out to someone, and that's okay. But online is also really great because when I've been to some networking events in the past, there's been like one person surrounded by like 12 students. So it's really hard to like build an authentic connection. So like if they respond to a LinkedIn message in online now networking, it gives you a chance to have their sole attention for that moment. As well as online like networking, I think it's not just like a student and professional, it can also be among students. So like right now with classes virtual, not being in person, it's really a great opportunity to reach out to other students and other UBC community members and see what you can learn from each other, what you can offer each other. And just like networking is also a way to build community. Like through my community at UBC, I've passed along job opportunities to friends or network connections to friends, or just reaching out to folks in your network and seeing if you're interested in something, asking if they know someone that they could introduce you to, or like family friends or guardians or just whoever is in your present circle as well is really good to reach out to, because everyone can offer value in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, yeah. So looking back at your UBC journey and your professional career so far, what would you say is the most valuable connection or a few most valuable connections that you've made to pursue either your UBC degree or your career so far?
Yeah, I think some of the most valuable connections, like definitely my current boss, meeting her in Shanghai was an incredible connection, and I wouldn't have made that connection if it wasn't through like going to exchange in France or like having opportunities at UBC to meet and talk to people that I thought were interesting, because she was this like very cool like CEO, like new founder, and like going up and talking to her was really nerve-wracking, but ultimately UBC gave me some of the courage and like public speaking interaction skills to make that connection. As well as during UBC, just making connections with my fellow classmates has been super meaningful, and I definitely don't think I would have made it through UBC as well as I did without those connections and that support network. So a lot of my closest friends I was in group projects with, or met through peer programs or different communities at UBC that I sought out to find, even like when I wasn't necessarily looking for community.
Definitely. We're getting quite a few questions about your experience at UBC. So just going back to university experience in general, what was one of the most meaningful experiences that you've had specifically in your first year?
Yeah, so besides that really first presentation, I think another meaningful experience in my first year was just like seeing like what UBC had to offer, and like finding my way around campus and finding those pockets of community and like meeting people as well. Like I found first year was a really incredible time to meet people, because so many people are in the same boat. Like even if they have friends from high school at UBC, you're in a new place. Like you might be learning things you've never learned before, or like opening yourself up to new opportunities, new experiences, new people. So it's just a really powerful opportunity to meet people in the same boat and build connection. I think that was definitely the most meaningful experience aside.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going off of that as well, someone asked, how do you deal with fear of missing out? And how do you prioritize the things that you want to do or you decide to do, knowing that you will be missing out on others if you do them?
Oh, FOMO, very, very, very real.
Oh.
I experienced a lot of FOMO in first year. So in second year, I went overboard, and I was so afraid of missing out on opportunities or experiences that I said yes to everything, like yes to being a part of this society, yes to attending this event, yes to this and that. And by like December of second year, I was so burnt out from trying to avoid FOMO that I realized, okay, like need to put down some boundaries, know when to say no, but also when to say yes. Like when we're going to a conference or an event, add value versus when is it just an extra thing, and sort of reconciling when it's good to say no to something and when it's good to say yes to something, even if you are tired and not feeling up to it, then it might be better to find those pockets of community. But also like prioritizing like your own well-being as well, and like especially like for fear of missing out, one of the things is like with internships and stuff like that, like you're like, oh, I have this fear because person A is doing this incredible internship and I'm doing this, and just like realizing, okay, it's okay that you're at a different stage in your professional journey or your UBC journey. Like folks get to different stages at different times. That's completely okay, and you shouldn't be worried about missing out on some grand adventure, some grand opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And then also, you spoke about how doing the things that you value the most, like deciding on what you want to do. And once someone asked from your experience, from joining many extracurricular activities at UBC and taking on all these awesome opportunities, how do you establish your presence once you're involved in something and make the most out of your experience?
Yeah, so I think like making the most out of your experience is all about finding like roles and communities that fit for you. Like I definitely think like UBC acapella, like it wasn't necessarily a resume padding activity, but like I love music, I love to sing. So like for me that was enjoyable to be involved and have like almost like a couple hours break a week just to like sing and hang out with people who are interested in the same thing. Whereas like some other activities, like with equity ambassadors, with a lot of on-campus activities or clubs, it's nice because you can be as involved or as little involved as you want to be. So for example, like with equity ambassadors, like you could take the initiative to organize events or facilitate these activities or events or awareness campaigns, or you could just be there to learn and listen and unlearn. So it's really like up to you. Like UBC's motto is 2MS, like it's yours, make it yours. So it's really up to you to make the experience your own through asking questions, through again building those connections. Like in my first year in equity ambassadors, I asked questions of the previous year's members, like, okay, what was good last year? Like, what did you learn? What are we going to do this year? And then slowly moving into more lead roles and taking the lead and organizing these different events.
Definitely. And I also think that once you are involved in something that is a lot of value to you, you automatically start putting in more effort and getting better at showing that you are present and you're willing to help in whatever it is.
Definitely, yes, it's so important.
Yeah. And I think you did touch upon this a little bit when you talked about your exchange in France and how you realized that your credits won't be counted towards your degree from UBC. But going off of that, have you ever had any experience with failure? And how did you go about it? How did you deal with it? What were the outcomes of it?
Yeah, so I've touched on this a little bit, but I'll definitely expand on something. So I think like every time I failed, whether it's like a perceived failure or an actual failure, something good has come out of it, an opportunity has come out of it. For example, in second year, I was planning to go on exchange in third year, but in second year, my grades were too low to go on exchange, so I couldn't go on exchange in third year. However, as a result of that, I was able to be more heavily involved in UBC orientations and actually support training the orientation leaders. As well, I had the opportunity to take a really cool collaborative course that gave me the opportunity to travel to Europe as part of that course. Like all about finding those opportunities. Same thing when my credits didn't transfer and my plan of graduating in 4 years was shattered. I was given the opportunity to co-chair the SLC, which leading that student leadership conference was one of the highlights of my entire university career. So if I had not failed, if I had not had an opportunity taken away from me, I wouldn't have been given this opportunity. So I think like failure is something that should be talked about more and is definitely not something to be ashamed of, because like it's through failure that people learn. It's through failure you find out where your passions are, where your values are, and like through failure comes a lot of opportunities. I think it's important to talk about your failures, rejoice in them, reflect on them for a moment, but then move on, see what's out there, and see what impact you can create.
Definitely. And then also kind of going off that like failure and then work-life balance, how do you kind of like separate yourself from any setbacks that have happened, and then how do you get back up and kind of just continue with having like a good work-life balance and then maintaining it and just managing different, because there's so many like as students there's so many things we're involved in, so just because we fail in one aspect of it, how do we kind of just like learn from it kind of quickly and then just continue working towards whatever our goal is?
Yeah, I think that like that sort of thing of like getting up after failure, a bad experience really needs to come from within. Like, it's great to have the community support and feel your community rallying behind you and pushing you forward. Like, you really need to validate yourself and your choices. And like, when I failed in aspects of my life, I'm like, okay, this sucks. Like, we'll take a moment to wallow in like my self-pity, self-doubt, and like all those really horrible feelings. But then after that moment is over, I move past it and instead focus on like the opportunities I've had in my life that I'm grateful for, things I've done that I'm proud of, things I hope to accomplish in the future, and using that gratitude, that pride, and that goal setting to drive forward your decision making. And as for work-life balance, I think just like figuring out how to prioritize things. Like, for me, work-life balance is something I'm learning ongoing. Before this call, I was chatting with Nikita, and I was like, well, sometimes I'll have meetings like 3 a.m. and then I'll like have meetings at 7 a.m. and like just not sleeping a lot, which is not balanced. That's not work-life balance. Like, not getting enough sleep is not balanced. So it's definitely an ongoing process and something that I'm definitely working on and have been working on through university. But I think it's important to be cognizant of it and know areas where you need a bit more balance and just focusing on ways you can achieve that. For example, for me, like if I get an email past 7 p.m. now, I don't respond. I just wait for it until the morning, or I've said no to certain meetings at 2 a.m. that aren't essential, that I'm there. And just all about like crafting spaces for you to relax and maybe turn off your device, or instead of finishing that email, going and having a Zoom happy hour with friends, or just creating those pockets of social life or pockets of enjoyment in amongst your work or school life is really important.
Definitely. I also think that what you mentioned about boundaries, I think having boundaries between your personal life and then knowing when to prioritize yourself, instead of, because being a student, everything is so intertwined, like academics, work, and personal life, everything is very like intertwined together. So knowing where to set the boundaries is very important as well. And going off of the topic of failures, what do you think has been the biggest challenge in your career so
I think like with my career, like my post UBC professional career, which in 2 years in is still its infancy, a couple biggest challenges was in Peru. When I moved there, I didn't speak a word of Spanish. So just like from a professional standpoint, not being able to connect with folks I wanted to partner with, or not being able to connect with the woman that the social enterprise project was benefiting was a huge challenge. So I combated that by really diving in and pushing myself to learn Spanish. And next up, the second biggest challenge is like, I've never worked remote in this capacity before. So just having to completely onboard for my Shanghai job, remote and online, was a huge challenge. Like thinking of questions but not being able to ask them until 12 hours later, or like miscommunication because of different language barriers, and that leading to potential issues, and just like being really open to learning and like new things and new opportunities has been a challenge, but a challenge that I'm grateful for.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of people go through that, especially with, I think everything being online has kind of emphasized it a bit more. So yeah, I definitely think. So going off of like the challenge as well, what would you say is your greatest strength, and how has that allowed you to excel at your job?
Ooh, greatest strength. That's a good one. For me, I definitely think my greatest strength is my adaptability. I feel like I can adapt to different situations, to different communication styles. If plans change, like I might have a moment and panic, but then I adapt and move on. And I think especially working internationally, that has allowed me to be happy and focus on things rather than worrying about things changing, because I can adapt so quickly to the different circumstances or expectations.
Yes, I definitely think adaptability is a very important skill to have, especially in such an international world, where people, especially now, because everyone's working. I know so many people are working. Like you, for example, you're working from Calgary for your office, which is, I think, headquartered in China, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, that takes a lot of adaptability. And we have time for, I think, 2 or 3 more questions. Um, so just going back to your journey at UBC, what would you say is one important life lesson that you would attribute to your educational experience at UBC?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think one of my most important life lessons from my UBC experience is just listening, but also asking questions. Like whether you're in a group project which there's a lot of in Sauder and at UBC in general, like listening to your team members, like thinking, what can I learn from them? Asking questions I feel is really undervalued, like asking questions of yourself, asking questions of your team members, your classmates, your professors, your like other folks in the community is just a skill and a lesson that has allowed me to build connection post UBC. It allows me to learn more in my job and just to create those moments and opportunities for myself through asking questions, whether it's to learn more or advance in some way.
Definitely. I also think like putting yourself out there and like not being afraid to just ask questions because no questions are, as everyone has said. I think all my profs in all my classes at the beginning they say no questions are dumb questions. So don't be afraid to just ask if you're thinking it. A lot of other people will be thinking it too.
Exactly. Just ask it and go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going through the questions. I missed one. So someone asked, was going back to like your management styles. So how did you personally take notes for courses? Are there any specific structures or styles that worked for you?
Yeah, so for taking notes, I was a bit of a hybrid. So if professors supplied the slides, I really loved just putting notes directly on the slide rather than completely rewriting the slides. That was my preferred way. But then if they didn't provide the slides, because I know like some profs don't like to send out slides, then for me, like I'm a huge fan of color coding notes, of like putting questions within the notes that I had during the class to go back to after that night or the week or go to office hours. So just making sure like all my questions are there. Like I use different colors for things that I struggled with so that I could spend more time studying that. And like I'm not someone who has beautiful handwriting or like bullet journals or anything, so my notes were atrocious and messy, but that worked for me, and I was able to read them and see areas for improvement, areas that I needed to focus on. Yeah, but I think like finding your note style and knowing how much you need to write versus how little. Like I have some friends who like basically like rewrite the entire slide or the entire textbook in their notes, and that works for them, but it doesn't work for me. So just exploring and trying different methods and talking to your classmates as well will help you figure out how to take notes.
Definitely. Um, and then, so just last questions before we finish it for today. I'd just like to give you the last word. And so, what would you, this is one of the big questions, what would you say is the most important takeaway that you'd like the audience to leave with today? So, like, what kind of advice or encouragement would you offer any UBC students, either if they're in first year or if they're graduating soon?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I think for final words, first and foremost, I know we touched on failure a lot today, is not to be afraid of failure. And in failure, look for opportunities, look for what you learned and what you can accomplish from those learnings. Next up is adaptability. I know this year is not what any of us expected for learning style, living location perhaps, or current circumstances. We're just being adaptable, and this year might be different, but it doesn't mean that you can't still create those connections and build that UBC community, whether it's with your professors or fellow students. So just being adaptable to the circumstances at hand. And finally, finding out what you value and how you can make an impact. I think there's so many opportunities at UBC through campus life, through courses. And if you take the time to explore and think with yourself about what you value, what sort of change do you want to bring to campus, what sort of change do you want to bring to the community or yourself or after graduation, and taking the time to think about what you value, then you will create an impact not only on yourself and your community, but also on campus and your future career afterwards is really important to remember. Yeah,
Thank you
and
so
those are my
much.
final words of wisdom.
Thank you. I know I definitely learned a lot from whether it comes from time management or just making the most out of uncertainty. I think all UBC students, all university students definitely do go through a lot of uncertain periods, especially now. So I think it was really important for all of us to hear that even if things are not going as we planned, they will be okay. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us. And then to the students also, thank you so much for being here. We will be continuing to offer similar events throughout winter term 1 and 2. So please be sure to check out our virtual Collegium Canvas calendar for all the future events. And all future alumni office hours will be included there, as well as many other events and activities. So I definitely encourage you to visit Careers Online, the UBC Hub of 10,000 Coffees, and the UBC events calendar to stay up to date on all our events. And thank you again to our incredible speaker for sharing her experiences and insights today. And of course, again, thank you, big thank you to all of you for choosing to be a part of today's Alumni Office Hours. And yeah, stay safe until our next event. And I'll see you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.